And now it is time to introduce our next speaker. Mark Heckler is a software developer and principal cloud developer advocate for Java and JVM languages at Microsoft, conference speaker, Java champion, and Kotlin developer expert focused on developing innovative, production-ready software at velocity for the cloud and edge computing platforms. He has worked with key players in numerous industries and public sector organizations to develop and deliver critical capabilities on time and on budget. Mark is an open source contributor and author of Spring Boot Up and Running. Mark lives with his very understanding wife in St. Louis, USA. So please welcome. Hello, Mark. Thank you very much for joining.
Hi, Yuri. Hey, it's just a pleasure to be here. So thanks for inviting me. And gosh, I hope I can live up to my bio. That sounds amazing.
Well, it is impressive, though, the whole set of... And you being an advocate of JVM languages, I must ask this question. Which one is the best?
Uh, Whatever one you're using. That's the nice way to put it. It's tough to pick one favorite child. They all, I guess, how do you put it? There are some that you don't, you clearly have some issues with things that they're doing right now, but you love them all. So
Yeah, I mean that's a good difference from the typical answer that we're receiving. It depends, right? So
I guess it all comes down to that eventually, though. It depends, but yeah, I mean, how do you choose among your kids? They're
yeah, that's
all
true.
so wonderful and so maddening at the same time.
That's true with their own personalities, let's so
All
to say.
right.
And Mark, you've got two talks prepared for the conference today. Is that right?
I do, yes, and yeah, these are both a little bit of a departure from things that I've done in the past, but they're just so much fun, and I feel like so rewarding for developers, me included, because I tend to talk about things I enjoy. Who wants to talk about stuff that's like, oh, why are we here?
Yeah.
What are we
Yes.
doing? So, yeah, these are a couple talks that I'm really excited about, and I'm happy to share with you.
Absolutely. So then we'll do it this way. Let's start with the first talk, and then we'll make a pause for any questions and answers, and then drive right into the second talk, right? So having said
Okay.
that, the stage is all yours. So whenever you're ready.
Outstanding. Well, let's get rolling here, and we'll see how this goes. So, welcome to Devoxx Ukraine. This is just awesome to be back. I actually forgot my flight suit at the hangar. Stupid, but I did wear my Devoxx Ukraine shirt from prior engagements. I absolutely love this event. Love the folks behind it. I'm just happy to be a part of it. So the first talk, the first session is, well, as you can see, Copilot is my Copilot, or as I like to say, pair programming with an AI. And I chose those words specifically and very carefully, and I'll get into that, into why as we go along. But again, my name is Mark Heckler. I'm a principal cloud advocate of Java and JVM languages, trying not to pick favorites. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, hopefully we'll have some time at the end. That's the plan. You know how plans are. But if not, or if you think of things like I do, your best questions, your best comments, 10 minutes after you disconnect or after we roll into the next session, that's normal for me. So don't feel bad about that. But please do reach out to me at my work email, markheckler at microsoft.com, my personal email, mark at thehecklers.com, or better yet, on Twitter /X/ whatever we're going to call it next week, at mkheck. Email works, but I do check X, I guess now. Boy, that's just hard to get used to. I do check X more frequently. It's just not a matter of preference per se, but it's just a matter of where I spend most of my time. So, by the way, my DMs are open. So if you have questions, comments, or feedback that you want to share with the world, great. If you don't, just follow me and DM me, and I will get that. And I respond, again, much quicker via Twitter /X than I do email as a general rule. So with that, let's get rolling. And that didn't advance. Cool. Technology is great when it works, right? So a bit about me. I am an architect and developer. As Yuri said, I am an advocate. I always tell people advocacy actually combines two things that I love to do best, which is code and talk. So I get to do both as an advocate, which is something I'm grateful for every day. I am an author. I have co-authored a couple of books. I've contributed content and code to several other books. I solo authored a book, and I'll get into that a bit more later. But in summary, I am a Java champion, Java 1 rockstar, groundbreaker ambassador, Kotlin developer expert, and a licensed instrument-rated pilot. Now, I mentioned that the specific terms of Copilot is my Copilot, and and whatnot were very intentionally chosen, because one of the things that struck me about when I was thinking about this talk initially is that in aviation, there are a lot of parallels in aviation and technology. And granted, there are a lot of non-parallels as well, like any two domains. But I enjoy the technical intricacies of flying, and in aviation, aircraft are typically certified as one pilot or dual pilot operations. So when an aircraft is sufficiently complex, then it's rated, are required to have two pilots on the flight deck in order to successfully and properly operate that. And obviously in emergencies, if there's a medical emergency or something with one pilot or something, it can be managed with one, but typically normal operations require two pilots for these dual pilot certified cockpits. Now, in development, many times we're just tooling along happily, and we're doing that single pilot, authorized airframe aircraft, and we're doing okay. But in many cases, as developers, we take on more complexity because we don't. I don't think we're drawn to this field unless we're problem solvers. We're kind of natural or maybe acquired talent. Problem solvers. We like to tackle difficult issues and solve them. I think that's what gets us engaged and keeps us engaged. However, one of the hazards of that is that many times when we see a lack in terms of being able to create or deploy a particular bit of functionality or technology, we just say, well, just give me the permissions and I'll take care of it myself. And that is great to a point, because we wind up satisfying and generally delighting, hopefully, our end users, our customers, our community. But what often happens is that additional responsibility then sticks to us, and we never really lose it. We never really get rid of it. We never surrender that back to maybe others who should be handling that, because we just get it done. And that's fine to a point, right? But the problem is we wind up taking on a lot more responsibilities that are necessary but aren't on the critical path for us delivering additional capabilities and functionalities to our end users / customers / community. And again, many times that is just a lot of complexity that should necessarily be operated by another pilot, right? So that dual pilot operations become single pilot operations in an aircraft that was never intended to be so. So that's where the whole idea of copilots come in. I think the naming that OpenAI and Microsoft chose personally, and this is just at a personal level, was brilliant, because it really emphasizes the fact that it's not there to take over wrest control of the controls from you and do it. It's there to support you in your operations. So when you have on the flight deck, you have a captain and a first officer, or a pilot and co-pilot. The idea is they work together, but the captain is still in charge, right? And this is exactly what a co-pilot is meant to do. It's meant to be that co-pilot, that first officer, while you're still remaining that captain. You're still having to use this. This is the most important tool that you can bring to bear on a problem. And of course, the co-pilot is there to assist you to make sure that you are the most productive you can be, the happiest you can be, and the best you can be in delivering that functionality. So the latest book I mentioned, I didn't release this book. O'Reilly released this book. I wrote this book, but it was released last year, and it is centered around building Java and Kotlin applications for cloud native environments. And other than the data feed, which I didn't see a lot of reason to duplicate, everything, all examples in there are written in both Java and Kotlin. Now, I wrote this when Spring Boot 3 wasn't out yet, and I don't want to change the repo to not match the book. So what I'm doing is converting this to Spring Boot 3 and all the latest goodies in a parallel repo. But what I would encourage you to do is follow the book on Twitter for announcements. If you want to check out the book at no charge, hit the bit.ly Spring Boot book link at the top. That reroutes you to O'Reilly. You can get, I think it's a 7-day free trial of Safari Books Online. So you can check it out and any other book for free. Of course, you can buy it and read it or hit it up at the library or whatever. But yeah, check it out if you're interested. I tried to write it from the idea of a new to the tech stack, beginner, if you will. But I also put in some of my favorite things and the time savers, the work savers, the brain savers or brain multipliers that an experienced Spring Boot person would appreciate. So I think there's something in there for everybody. Check it out if you like. If not, that's all good too. So today's flight plan. Now, when it comes to flying as a passenger, and when I fly commercial, it's the same thing. As a passenger, but you typically, your flight starts when you are boarded and it ends when you deplane, and that's fine. However, when you're the pilot or one of the pilots, you have to do a lot of other things. So we're not going to do a visual inspection of the aircraft or anything like that today, but we are going to kind of talk in terms of the flight plan for our session, which is we're going to do a pre-flight briefing and clearance, discuss whether this trip is really necessary. That's always the first thing. Do we need to make this trip or not? If so, which Copilot or Copilots make the most sense for developers? We'll take flight, we'll do the coding, testing, deploying, and we probably won't get to all of that, but I'm going to do as much as I can and kind of show the mechanics behind that where it makes sense. And then we'll land. We'll bring it home. We'll do the post-flight briefing, and then we'll roll on into the next session. But that's kind of the plan for the day. Now, let's see. So I just want to, yeah. So let's start here. Is this trip really necessary? Well, I guess technically you could get through your entire career and never use a Copilot, although that's getting increasingly harder to imagine at this point. However, if you don't take advantage of all tools at your disposal, you'll probably be left behind in the contrails. And that's something that none of us want, right? We're problem solvers. We like tools. We like to bring all available tools to bear on a problem domain that's sitting in front of us and solve it quickly, effectively, and elegantly, hopefully. So this is one of those tools. A Copilot or Copilots are tools that help you do your job. I will say this. I've had a lot of discussions, as you might imagine, with other folks about this. And one of the observations was, well, Copilots don't always get everything right? I mean, they might suggest code that has a method that doesn't exist for this particular class, and things like that. And of course that can happen. But the gentleman I was chatting with said, well, maybe we shouldn't give this to our junior developers because it might confuse them. And my question back at that point was, do you or have you in the past restricted your junior developers, your new to a particular tool chain developers, from getting on the internet? Do you restrict them from looking up things in Google or hitting Stack Overflow or anything like that? And the answer, of course, was absolutely not. That's crazy. That helps them learn. And my response to that observation was, well, then why would you restrict them from something that may not be 100% right 100% of the time? Because I guarantee you, every one of us has found code online that looks like it solves a problem that we've run up against, that we've just banged our head against for maybe hours or weeks, hopefully not weeks. But we've tried that code and it's not worked quite as it was intended or as we'd hoped. And that's exactly what a Copilot will do on occasion. It's generally the fidelity is superb. No mistake about it. But there are going to be times that I don't know whether, I assume, my conjecture is that it's because it pulls in a lot of different training data, of course, from different languages. So at times it will maybe pull in a method that doesn't exist within our language / version, et cetera. And that can happen, but it can also happen when you go search Stack Overflow. So in my mind, it's a superb training tool or educative assistance tool for junior developers. But of course, like most tools, it can be far more effective for senior developers. And I try to, and as we go through the code, I try to not, of course, this is easy for me, not show too much knowledge, but what I want to do in this particular session is to lean heavily on the tool and show you how much it really can do for you. I'll be coding maybe at a little bit lower sophistication level, intentionally to try to get the tool to step up, and it does. So I give away the ending here a little bit, but I will say when it comes to the next question, which Copilot or Copilots make the most sense for developers? Everything I'm telling you today may change by the time you wake up tomorrow. And that's kind of the nature of the beast, because in tech, things do move quickly. I'm reminded of the Ferris Bueller's Day Off thing. Life moves pretty quickly. It moves even more quickly when it comes to cutting edge technology. And generative AI is indeed that kind of cutting edge technology. So I get the nightly builds, I get all of the updates as soon as they come out, which means that literally between times that I might run this, if I run it today, I run it tomorrow, things may change, recommendations may change, the code that it generates may, for whatever reason, flag is filtered, because it might, maybe one time it finds that code in my repo, but maybe another time it finds it in another person's repo, and it's identical, but it's not listed with a license that is as permissive as all my code is. My code is typically under the most permissive license or licenses. So maybe it filters that out of an abundance of caution. So anyway, things change, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So roll with it. I mean, we didn't get into this industry because we like things to stay exactly the same forever. We should embrace change, and this is another way to do it. And again, maximize your effectiveness on a day-to-day basis. So things will change. Recommendations I make now will change, perhaps, hopefully slightly, perhaps usually slightly. But keep your head in the loop and make those decisions each day as things do adapt to the current circumstances. So we're going to code, test, deploy. That's kind of the cycle that I'll be following in the example anyway. Again, I don't know how far we'll get with things, but we'll do the best we can. So let's take flight. So, I don't want to skip ahead here. Let's stop here and we'll go right to our other thing. So let's see if I go here. Nope, that's the wrong one. There we go. And my co-presenter, my colleague, my dog is over here kind of like staring at me. So coughing at me. But yeah, okay, she's going back to sleep. Life's good. Okay, so let me expand this a bit. This is a Spring Initializer. This is where we will begin our voyage for today, because I mean, I'm heavy into Spring. If you're just using plain Java or Kotlin or Groovy or anything else, the ideas are still very much the same. But of course, Spring and Java, that's kind of our bread and butter here. So I'm going to change some project metadata to the hecklers.com. For some reason, it always works better that way. I don't know why. Kidding. I'm going to call this Copilot. Let's see, Copilot Devoxx UA. There we go. Let's make it good here. This will be our Copilot demo, and that works. I'm going to keep jar and packaging and Java 17 just for now. Again, I like to play things pretty much down the middle of the road to keep things consistent. But again, venture out on either side as you see fit, as you desire. So I'm going to pull in some, again, very basic dependencies, because I don't want to get lost in the fluff. I want to focus it right down the middle on the important things. I'm going to bring in the Spring Web dependency. We'll make a web app. I'm going to bring an actuator. I don't think we're going to have time for that, anything related to that, but hope springs eternal. So I'm going to also bring in Spring Data Mongo so we can interact with a MongoDB database, and then test containers. Again, many of these things are kind of tangential, so I won't cover them extensively, but I do want to have them there because, hey, it's my code, my app. So let's generate our application. I'm going to hopefully drop this on the desktop. Come on, there we go. And I've got my sandwich out there, as you can see. We'll be opening up and consuming that sandwich later. So let's go ahead and open that. And I'm going to open that. Oh dear. Okay, well, that's fine. I'll just do this the hard way because things are not playing along. So here we go. So we'll unzip our Copilot, and we'll change directory into there. And then I'm just going to load this up in Visual Studio Code. Now, I will say this: if you come to my next session, if you stick around with me for the next session, there. Okay, I thought I lost my key combinations. I will be using IntelliJ. IntelliJ works really well with GitHub Copilot, which is where I spend most of my time. However, Visual Studio Code brings in things like Copilot Chat. You can see it has a really nice presentation of some things I want to show as well. That's interesting. That's fine. Hopefully that's fine. I'm not sure really why that failed. Let me try to go back out and come back into that again. Probably fine, except it doesn't, can't find Java support. Be a very short demo, mostly questions and answers. Okay, that looks a little better, maybe. So you can do it. All right, we'll assume that'll work. Now, when it comes to the project, I mean, you've got your basic project order, null annotation. Yes, that looks more promising. Enable. So we'll go to our POM. We see the standard stuff. We're using Spring Boot 3.1.4, Java 17, all the usual culprits here. So we have everything that we want. I don't necessarily need anything in application properties. What I do need, though, is I always like to check that just to make sure everything is where it should be. Let's see, open Copilot. So again, this is a standard Spring Boot application, but it doesn't have anything. When you created a Spring Boot application using the Spring Initializer, you're just creating that project structure and bringing in your build file with the dependencies you choose. So that's a good start, but it doesn't have anything here that's functionality wise. So I'm going to start this fairly manually. Again, we'll assume a little knowledge on the part of a developer, maybe a solid junior developer, but I'm not going to assume much more than that. And we'll just see where this takes us. So I'm going to create a new class here, and I'm going to make this all about developers, right? So, pardon me. So our domain will be a developer. And we'll make this a record. I'm going to use records because why not, right? I mean, it is 2023. I'm going to be saving these developers in a MongoDB database, as I mentioned. I'm going to annotate the ID field. And as you can see, it offers, Copilot built in, kind of offers some help, right? It prompts you, code with me, if you will. And that does a pretty good job. We're not going to need all of this. I'm going to change this out to skills. Of course, it's giving you some things to kind of prompt you and move you along, but obviously you can edit anything and you can ignore all of it if you want. But this gets us going pretty quickly. So there's our domain, again, keeping it simple. I'm going to now create a developer repository so that we can, and I'm going to define this as an interface because when it comes to Spring Boot and Spring Data, you can extend an interface defined in Spring Data. We'll extend our CRUD repository interface. And you can see once again, and see if I can scroll and zoom this in, you can see that GitHub Copilot is suggesting that, hey, do you want a repository that will store items of type developer with IDs of type string? And of course, all we do to accept that, and we can tab through this. In this case, there's one option, so we can't tab through this or move through this, but we can tab and accept that, and then we're done. So this is nice. I mean, I'm a pretty quick typist, as most of us are, but so I can type this pretty quickly, but this is kind of a nice sanity check. And let's face it, when you get a large method, as we'll start seeing as we go, this can be a huge time saver as well. So that's a welcome change. So the next thing we want to do is create another Java class, and we'll call this our developer controller. And we'll just make this a class. I'm going to annotate this with actually REST controller because this is a controller. And we're going to be serving up some kind of an API here. So a REST API. And I'm going to use my developer repository to, and again, it's prompting me faster than I could type it, to import or to have a member variable that's defined for this repository. I'm going to do a constructor injection here. So I'll generate the constructor. And that's just standard good IDE work right there. So that's not Copilot related, but it's quick. And then I'm going to define an API. And I'm just going to start. I always like to do kind of a liveness check here. And just call this, and see, it's offering me things. I don't need all that. So I want the public string. I'm just going to say hello. We'll start with that. And look, it just prompts me and puts that in. Hello, Devoxx Ukraine. That's really nice. How did it know, right? So this is something that's fairly useful. Again, it's not a huge time saver yet at this point, but it's helpful. It's just something that kind of lets you focus on the complexity and helps you fill in the things that maybe aren't quite as brain bending. So once again, it kind of sees that, hey, you're probably going to want a dev's endpoint or a developer's endpoint. And then if I put this, yeah, this is pretty close to what I'd want. So I just tab through. Now, it's not exactly what I want because it doesn't know or doesn't for some reason understand that I typically write my methods like this, get all devs, not just all devs. And that's fine. You can make changes. You can do whatever you want. But this gets us partway there. Now, that actually has the functionality we need, but it doesn't help if we don't have any data to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and create some data. I'll use Java new class once again. I'm going to call this our data loader. And let's load some data. So we'll call this, make this a class. I'm going to make this a component, right? And then I'm going to, once again, private final. Yep, I'm going to inject my repository. And I'll just generate the constructor for that. And yeah, so we'll just, I mean, this is a component. It'll load when the application initializes. So we'll just get started. I like to delete all this. And again, it's seeing my patterns as I use them. And it's by and large using me first, which is good. So it picks up your style and the way you approach things first, as well as pulling in expertise from a lot of code that it's trained on as well. But you're the first guinea pig, so it tries to match your style as much as possible. So your Copilot works for you. So a good practice is to delete all records in the database if you're going to be loading this data. You don't want to keep loading the same data over and over and go from 3 records to 30 records to 300 records, et cetera. Or maybe you do, but if so, that's a different issue. So what I like to do once we're done is do a repo find all and for each, and then just do this and see it anticipates my next suggestion there, makes a suggestion. But in between, we need to load some data. And this is where I'd like to switch from just writing this all kind of by hand with Copilot assistance in the code to go to GitHub Copilot chat. And I'm going to expand this a little bit. And as you can see, it just says, hey, I'm your Copilot, and I'm here to help you get things done faster. So here's some things you can do. You can generate unit tests. We'll come back to that. Explain the selected code, which is useful from time to time. Propose a fix for the bugs in my code. Well, of course, none of us write bugs into our code, so that's probably not that helpful, but just in case it should ever happen, or if you're reviewing someone else's, that's nice to know. So I'm going to just say, hey, create a list of type developer using uuid.random. Oops, let's see, keep it down here, random UID, and you can give this some pretty specific instructions as you're seeing, as the ID, names of, and we'll say Julien Dubois. He's my manager. I like to make sure he knows that I'm here and actually doing real work. That's good. And drinking coffee, of course. Coffee fuels the work. I'll put me in there. And of course, let's bring in some of the Spring team, good friend Dave Sire and Josh Long as well, good friend Josh, and skills of Spring. Actually, let me do this to try to delineate here. Spring and Azure. Spring and Azure, that's Julian and myself. Spring boot and Spring AI for Dave, and Spring boot and we'll say Kubernetes. Josh will love that. He loves YAML as skills. So let's see what we come up with. Maybe I wrote that poorly, and if so, we'll take another run at it. But this may give Copilot chat enough to think about and to come back with a nice list. Yeah, it says list. List. It wiped out my list developer. Interesting. So maybe I did write that very poorly. It usually comes back pretty quickly on things like this. Oh, here we go. Here's an example code snippet that creates a list of type developer. Oh my goodness. So that's quite that's not exactly what I wanted. So let's try that again. Create a list developer using as the ID with names. Okay, and skills of this. Okay. Oh, actually, I have skills in there twice, but that's fine. Yeah, for some reason, it's just not exactly as I wanted, but this is, well, actually, it's pretty good. So if we look at this matches very much what we have. So I'm actually, we kind of have some of this. I'm going to just grab this part and we'll drop that in there and take a closer look at this. So that's not half bad, right? So we're doing this. It's a little weird though. So can we do a create list of the developer objects? Let's try that. And you see, it keeps track of where you are. So this is a little more to my liking right here. So I'm going to grab that and we'll just replace this. And that looks a little nicer, right? And as you can see, that has my list of. Not exactly what I wanted. So let's say change skills from list of to a string. And we'll see what we get here. So this is, it's okay. So that might look a little better. Oh, that's much better. So yeah, let's grab that. And this is kind of a nice way to riff. And yes, the short answer of can I just write this myself? Of course you can write it yourself. But again, I'm keeping the examples pretty simple just to make things easy to see. But in a much more complex example, then this gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. And this is really a nice way to solve it very efficiently. So we've got most of what we need there. Now, can we do better? Yes, we can. Let's see, feed the list of developer directly to repo.saveAll without creating an intermediate variable. Typing helps. There we go. So yes, can we do that? Is it possible? Well, of course it's possible. And here's a great example of that. So we'll just do that and replace that. So that's looking pretty good, right? Yeah, not bad. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. And here's where I switch off to our Spring Boot dashboard. And we'll go ahead and run this now. I'm going to use test containers to run this because it's just a nice way to work. And we'll see where this takes us. Did it come up with, oh, it's still loading. Okay, I was going to say, did it come up with any kind of data shown? Yeah, there we go. So here are our 4 developers. If we want to test this and just make sure everything works, let's go ahead and create another terminal. And I can do an HTTP 8080. This should get our hello. First time we run it, of course, it says, hello, Devoxx Ukraine. Everything works. Now, if we want to go and try pulling back our devs, once again, everything works. So this is good, right? I told you, we don't write bugs into our code. That's just crazy. And we can clean this up a little bit. We can remove all unused imports and all that good stuff. So that's not bad. Now, I did this in a specific order, and there are many ways to do this. As you notice, I didn't do tests first. And typically, I like to do tests first. I much prefer to do tests first. But when it comes to, I find that when it comes to Copilot, it helps to have just a general a very basic structure out there to build off of for your API, and then you can do your tests based on that. And then, of course, build out your full API. This is very rudimentary. Just a simple liveness endpoint or a liveness check and a return all. So we'll take this, and what I want to do at this point is generate our initial round of tests. And time is okay. I think we're doing all right. But if not, if we have more time, I might expand on this. If not, I'll go on directly into the next thing. So we'll play it by ear. So we've got some tests here, and these don't look terrible, right? So let's see what we get here. Now, I can see some problems already, but this isn't terrible. So I'll go ahead and accept this, and then we will see where this dropped it. Now, here are some things that I find kind of interesting. If you notice, this is not idiomatic Java, and it poses some problems, as you can see from these lovely red lines here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rename this. Again, this is a Copilot. It doesn't take over for you. It just does some work on your behalf. So we'll call this developer controller test. And then I'm going to, instead of having this under source main Java, we'll move this where it belongs, down to source test Java. There we go. We'll move that. And look how happy that is. I'm going to close that out because I don't like that in the separate window, and we'll just open it up here. All right, so we can get rid of this, the little extra niceties, should we choose to. We don't have to, but I like it clean. All right, this is pretty good. I mean, for a test that it created for us, that's not horrible. However, we've got some things that maybe we want to clean up. Let's take a look at our hello first. It's checking the status that we get back, and then hello Devoxx Ukraine. Let's go ahead and try to run that one. I'm going to go over here and open my test window. I like to keep things nice and clear where we are, developer controller test, and we'll run our hello. That looks like that should work okay. Oh, I forgot that when you first come in here, we need to check and make sure all of our imports and everything come through fine. Unknown word. Well, that's probably fine. Let's add this to our user settings so we don't have this flag again. We'll see what else we run into. Iterable of. It's undefined for the type, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, right? We'll come back to this in a moment. Well, I guess let's do it now. Let's refactor this now. Why not? So, yeah, so this is interesting that we have a when find all, then return this iterable. Now, I'm going to just use your head, right? We're still the developer. What I want to do is go to the data loader class. So we put in the time to do this. Let's go ahead and use this. Let's take our list of, right? And we'll just use this same list for our test as well. And return. That looks much better. Hopefully, I got all of the, yeah, that is not bad. And we'll reformat that, and we'll continue where we left off here with our checks. That's an unknown word. We'll add that to user settings. And we'll see where we came in now. And for some reason, that is just not reformatting. I mean, it's for looks. It's functionality is fine, but the looks are terrible. Okay, so let me expand this. Oops. Yeah, so if we look at this, we can see that we've got some weird things. So when find all, we return this list, that's fine. But when we actually do the check for the endpoint, we're checking the status, that's good. But it's getting this name and language stuff, and it's putting in some really strange things. So what I'm going to do at this point is just take this list. We'll externalize this a little bit, and we'll grab that. Interesting. Not sure what happened there. All right. There we go. Pull that out. That looks a little better. And we'll do this. And we will assign that to a variable, to a new local variable. That's fine. Developers, except I'm just going to set this to var. Why not, right? And that looks a little better. So now I can just return developers. That looks okay. And now I can use that same thing here, our list. So I can say, well, just grab this, developers, oh, developers dot get 0. Actually, that's the, I do want to change that out and keep that. Sorry, I went down the wrong path there. Developers, and here we go. So developers dot get 0 dot ID. Oh. This is just fighting me every step of the way here today. So that's not my favorite thing. There we go. ID. There we go. Helps when you're in the right spot. Okay. The next thing here, we want to don't have a language. What we want to do is skills, and we want to grab our developers dot get 0 dot skills. Okay, and that's fine. We'll just stop there. And that should work. At least we'll always think it should. So let's go ahead and run hello. Assume everything works here on this one and it comes out fine. It evaluates fine. It's running. Hello ran fine. Let's go ahead and run our get all devs. So again, you're still the captain. You're still the pilot. You're still going to be looking at things and seeing first that it makes sense what you're trying to test. Oh, I'm getting the ID, am I not? And secondly, that it's actually testing successfully, but it's also testing what you want. I pulled in the ID, not the name. Yeah, it helps. Let's run this. Okay, everything ran successfully. So if I want to run the entire test, just go ahead and make sure we have a clean run all the way through. And everything comes up fine. So that's not bad, right? Copilot gave us a really good start, but again, it's incumbent upon us as developers to say, yes, it's testing, and perhaps it's even getting a successful run of the test and everything's coming back green. However, is it really testing for the outcome that I need it to test for? And if not, then it's up to us to change that. So anyway, we have that going. Let's go ahead and close that. Now, what else? Because I do want to leave a little bit of time at the end to go ahead and give you the links and answer any questions. So let's go back here. Yeah, let's go back to chat. All right. So what I've covered so far have been the coding, right? The testing, and now I want to get a little bit into deployment. Just dip our toes in. So what I like to do in many cases is create a Terraform script that allows me to configure the infrastructure to set things up to where I can deploy an application or several applications if you have a portfolio of applications cleanly and repeatably. So it would be really cool, wouldn't it, to develop a Terraform script? So we're just going to say create a Terraform script to create the infra for this project on Azure Spring Apps, for example. Pick your favorite here. So this actually is pretty nice. Now, there are some issues that I'm seeing, and I'll show you those as we go along. And of course, it doesn't just stop there. It says, oh, in order to actually run this script, you need to have the Azure CLI installed, be logged into your Azure account, then you can run the following commands: Terraform init, Terraform plan, Terraform apply. So it steps you along as you go. Now, the nice thing about this is many nice things, of course, but I'm just going to insert this into a new file, and we have that. And then I'm going to save that file. And it's a great starting point. It's a super efficient starting point. So rather than put it under source test Java or source main Java, we'll put this under source main Terraform, which is where I like to store such things. And we'll just name this main.tf. And there we go. Now you can see that obviously that we're already seeing that it's a Terraform file. It picks that up. We can go here to our Terraform tab and kick things off from there. But no time for that at the moment. I just want to show you there are a couple of things that, should we try to run this, there will be some issues. So typically when you deploy a Java application, you're not doing this. There are some things in here like the deployment, like the source type of jar, even the Spring Cloud service name, if I remember right, that are not part and parcel of this particular resource definition. So again, depending on the version of the recipe or the template that you're using, this may not necessarily match up with the current version. It may not necessarily match up with reality, but typically you have an Azure Spring Cloud Java deployment that you would use for Java deployments. So again, this is not 100%, but it's really nice in terms of getting you started quickly and getting you well down the road instead of going to the HashiCorp Terraform templates pages, the registry, and looking through and then copy pasting code out. This gets you well down the road very quickly with a minimum of muss and fuss. So pretty nice. I'm going to stop there on the code, and I'm going to switch back to the prezo here, and we'll land. We'll bring it home. So the important part of bringing it home is to make sure you have a successful landing. But I do like to point out that some of the gotchas, right? What is involved? Some of the catches with bringing it home safely and landing successfully. And when you're flying and you're in instrument conditions, maybe you're over water, maybe you just can't see anything because you're socked in and it's just nothing but fog, and you're relying solely on your instruments, no visual references at all. That's when you always hear the imagined engine roughness, right? You hear your engine start to kind of sputter or something, and you're like, Did I hear that right? Did I hear it miss a beat in there? Is something wrong? And of course, you always hear those things, and you imagine the wrong things the most when you're in the worst situations, right? But it happens. It happens all the time, and most of the time, when you think you hear something wrong with the engine or something, it isn't. But you are more susceptible to hearing that, shall we say. So this is the thing that you kind of have to watch out for with copilots, with generative AI. They may hallucinate. They may, as you may have heard, they may get it wrong. Many times it's just perceived engine roughness. Many times or occasionally it is actually engine roughness. And by that, I mean, it tried to give me an iterable of, it's going to suggest from time to time an API that maybe it thinks we should have. I don't know, maybe that's where it's going with it, but that doesn't exist within our version of the language that we're using or within the language at all. Generally very good, but once in a while, you just need to be on guard for that and aware. You can't take your brain out of the loop. With regard to the post-flight briefing, really apply AI wisely, reevaluate constantly, because in the initial run-ups to doing some of this, Terraform scripts were actually, I could create the best Terraform scripts by going to Bing chat with Copilot. And that worked really well until that support for that kind of shifted into GitHub Copilot, and then it was no longer there, or as effective anyway, under Bing Chat. So you have a lot of tools and Copilots at your disposal. However, you'll find that the capabilities in one may ramp up and may disappear in others because it just makes more sense as the topic area kind of refines and is better defined. You'll see these things kind of settle into a particular area, perhaps, but things change, and we need to change with them to get the best results. Please do use AI when it makes sense to do so, not when it feels fashionable. One of the wonderful things about our field is that when we get a new tool in our toolbox, we use it for everything. So if we get handed a new hammer, everything is a nail. We bang on everything and we try to drive it in, even stuff that has no business being banged on with a hammer. We do it. And that's not always good. However, the good part of that is we very quickly establish areas where that makes a lot of sense, where it's best used. And we very quickly weed out those areas that maybe it doesn't make as much sense to use it. So we initially bang on everything with that hammer, but we pretty quickly refine where it makes sense and makes the most sense to use it. And please do the same thing with AI. Use it where it makes sense for you to use. Constantly check your assumptions, reevaluate those, because the landscape does shift pretty rapidly. But know that you're going to settle into a rhythm pretty quickly of where it makes a lot of sense to use. Documentation, tests, just helping you with some complex code, getting a first cut out there. And you'll find that it really is a developer force multiplier in getting you down the road quickly and efficiently, and helping you actually write better code and more robust testable code. With that, some helpful resources. I have the code out in the Copilot repo under my GitHub account. I will be updating that and changing that. I need to push some things even now, which I'll do hopefully later today. So star and watch that so you're notified when changes happen. If you have a question on why I did a particular thing or used a particular Copilot in a particular way, please do ask. Or if you think of them later, if those questions, please do reach out to me on email or X and ask me there as well. It may be that I did that for a reason. Chances are I did, but it may be because of something that changes and evolves in the next day, week, month, who knows. So that's something that we need to keep discussing, because it makes a lot of sense to adapt as things adapt around us. So if you want to know more about the book, of course, it has a Twitter/X handle, and of course, I'm at MK Heck. Thanks for coming. Please stick around, and we'll do some questions, and then we'll roll into the next session, and we'll see where that takes us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we will have a very short time for the questions, though we'll have to jump in for the next one pretty soon. But a couple of questions still, right? First one, you mentioned finding a new tool and all the problems looking like a hammer like a nail, because the tool looks like a hammer, right? From your experience, what are these aspects that for you personally AI brings, or Copilot bringing, the most value? So you showed a few bits here. There was the actual code generation, or there was a test data generation, there was a unit test generation, and also the deployment script. And I can also imagine some other areas where this can be used. So for you personally, where would you say these tools would really shine and bring the most value to the developer?
All of these that I showed specifically, but there's another area that maybe people think of it first, maybe they don't think of it at all. But I find it can be, and I preface that with can be, super helpful when it comes to documenting things. So if you need to write up how something works, If you need to do kind of what we within Microsoft we call a learn module to kind of help people get their feet wet with something and dive into something new. That is super useful, or can be. And here's why I say can be, because when you start writing just general text in, like, I use Visual Studio Code for a lot of stuff. So I use it for writing up documentation and just notes to myself and things like that. So when you start doing this, it will suggest things. So if you start down a path and you write 3 or 4 or 10 words or whatever, and my Copilot says, "Oh, I think I know where he's going with this," and I'm talking on its behalf about me. Anyway, getting too confusing. So if it kind of thinks it knows where I'm going, and I say think euphemistically, if it assumes that it can fill in that in, it'll prompt with maybe 2 or 3 or sentences or a paragraph. And maybe that looks pretty good. Maybe it's something that you can work with. Maybe it's just garbage. I say garbage not in terms of content, but it's not where you were wanting to go with this paragraph. Well, just ignore it. Don't hit tab. Don't accept that. Just keep typing. But where it comes in very useful at times is that it's almost eerie how well if you give it enough tokens, enough of the prompt to work with, and you say the way to get started with with Spring Boot and Postgres is to start by bringing in the Spring Data module. Boom! It may fill out a paragraph that gives you a really nice introduction, saying go to start.spring.io, select these items, and you're like, wow, that's exactly, well, maybe not exactly, very close to what I would write. Hit tab and then tweak it. So some of the chores that we as developers don't necessarily love, but have to be done, need to be done, that we don't want to do them, but we want them to be done, it's super helpful in doing. And where it doesn't help you, again, you just don't hit tab. You kind of further craft your thoughts. And once you kind of pause to gather your next thoughts, it offers you another couple sentences, and you can accept those. So I find it a boon for helping with introductory documents, with documentation, and things like that, because it does shorten that cycle, or can anyway at times, from several hours to maybe just an hour, and you're one and done. And you provide it for review, and you make some minor tweaks, and then you're published within. So it works well for the kind of the bread and butter of things we do as developers, and the things that we need to do and don't necessarily love to do.
I see. Thank you. That's a very good answer, I believe. So yes, basically, using common sense and experimentation probably like brings you a long way, right? And if you don't like whatever is being typed, just spend more time to teach your little AI to follow your specific style and guess your thoughts better. And one more question coming from the chat, and then we'll do the next one. And it's a very practical one. Mark, how do you find using inline comments versus Copilot chat-driven coding? Personally, the commenter finds comments better for generating 1 or 2 lines of code for just like focused code work. So
that's a great question.
Versus comments, yes.
Yeah, that's a great question, because, and I just realized when you asked that, I didn't use any of the comments, which I typically will do from time to time. So if you can, the thing that the inline comments get you is if it is a fairly concise, and the questioner actually was, I think, leading into this. If it's a fairly concise, bit of code, that makes a ton of sense. If it's something you're going to have to iterate on, like I did with the chat window on that's okay, creating that new array list and adding them, but I really want a list out of, and so that lets you iterate and go through. And again, that wasn't overly complex code at all, but it shows kind of the example of keeping that chat active. But yeah, usually what I'll do is on the simpler stuff, I'll just create a comment saying, create this method doing this, and it does that, and I move on. So that's a great point. I would tend to, if it's something that you have a little more complexity or envision a little more complexity in that method, that you just jump into the chat window. And by the way, speaking of that, it's kind of timely, because just like yesterday or the day before, I think, GitHub announced that if you had a Copilot account, you would also get Copilot chat added on, no charge. So that's something that you can take advantage of. I think that, as far as I know, the only tools that it's available for right now are VS Code and Visual Studio. We don't typically use that as Java developers, but but it's there. And I don't think there's any opposition to fielding it in other IDEs like IntelliJ and NetBeans, et cetera, Eclipse. But obviously, you're limited in terms of your bandwidth to get things done. So it all obviously comes out in VS Code pretty much first, and goes from there. So yeah, I think using the comments is super helpful. If it's going to get intricate where you're going to need to kind of iterate on what you're doing, I think it makes sense to pop into that chat window and use it, because we all have access to it now. So
Perfect.